I was folding laundry in the quiet afternoon light of our suburban home, the familiar scent of fresh cotton and my husband's cologne still clinging to the shirts. When the doorbell rang, there stood Alex, Shun's best friend from college, tall, broad-shouldered, unexpectedly alone. Rain had caught him, his damp t-shirt clinging to his chest in a way that made my throat tighten. Our eyes met for a second too long as he stepped inside, water dripping onto the wooden floor between us. I reached for a towel, and in that single moment of closeness our fingers brushed. Heat bloomed where skin touched skin, just for an instant. Nothing more, yet it felt like the air itself shifted, heavy and charged. He smiled, shy, grateful. "Thanks, Mrs. Harper. Didn't mean to show up like this." His voice was low, polite, but it lingered in my chest longer than it should have. I told myself it was nothing. Just rain. Just a boy I'd known since he was 16. The next morning he joined us for breakfast in the kitchen. Coffee and toast filled the air while my son chatted about classes, laughing easily. I reached across the table to pass the butter, and my hand brushed Alex's fingers again. Warm, steady, the brief contact sent a quiet jolt straight through me. I pulled back too quickly, nearly knocking over my mug. My son didn't notice. Alex's gaze flicked to mine for half a heartbeat, then away. Later, while I scrubbed plates at the sink, he offered to help. We stood side by side, hips nearly touching every time one of us moved. The warmth of his body beside mine felt too close to real. I focused on the suds, on the running water, on anything but the way his shoulder occasionally grazed my arm. I told myself it was nothing. Just a polite guest. Just ordinary kindness. But already my mind kept replaying that small touch from breakfast, the way his fingers had felt against mine. Innocent. Accidental. By afternoon my son had gone out with friends, leaving the house strangely quiet. Alex and I were alone, moving heavy boxes from the garage. The texture of his strong arms brushed mine as we lifted together. His clean sweat mixed with soap whip. Warm, faintly masculine, made my breath catch in my throat. I tried to focus on the weight in my hands, on the dust motes dancing in the slanted light, but every shift brought us closer. "You don't have to help," I said, voice softer than I meant. He smiled, that easy college boy smile, and stayed right there. "I want to." Internally I wrestled. She is my son's friend, barely 22, practically family, yet the way his body moved so near mine stirred something deep and forgotten, a slow heat I hadn't felt in years. We set the last box down. For a moment we stood there, breathing the same warm garage air, inches apart. His chest rose and fell. Shine matched it without permission. I could smell the rain still lingering on his skin from yesterday. Could almost feel the faint warmth radiating from him through the thin cotton of his shirt. He looked at me then, really looked, in the silence stretched, fragile and electric. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was wrong. I stepped back first, bussying my hands with nothing, pretending the moment hadn't happened. But it had, and the ache it left behind refused to fade. That evening, while my husband watched TV in the next room, the low murmur of the news drifting through the wall like distant thunder, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My fingers traced the edge of the sheet. Slow, absent, the song Wonderwall floated faintly from Alex's phone in the guest room, the same one my son used to play on repeat during long car rides. What was I doing? He was practically family. I should feel ashamed, not this growing heat low in my belly. Spreading like warm honey I couldn't swallow down, yet I couldn't stop imagining his hands on me again. Steady, careful, the way they debrushed mine earlier. The guilt only made the fantasy sharper, cutting deeper with every breath I tried to steady. I turned onto my side, pressing my cheek into the pillow that still smelled faintly of my husband's cologne, but it did nothing to cool the flush crawling up my neck. How had one accidental touch unraveled me so quietly? The following night, after my husband went to bed early with a tired sigh and the click of the bedroom door, Alex and I ended up on the back porch sharing a bottle of wine. The cool night air carried the sweet scent of jasmine from the garden, wrapping around us like a secret neither of us wanted to name. Our conversation turned personal. Soft laughs, careful questions about dreams he hadn't told anyone else. His knee pressed lightly against mine under the small wooden table. Neither of us moved it away. "Yuri, not like other moms," he said softly, his voice barely above the rustle of leaves. My heart raced so hard I felt it in my throat. I knew we were crossing a line, but the whine in the way his gaze held mine made pulling back feel impossible, like fighting gravity when you're already falling. The glass felt slippery in my fingers. I took another sip just to have something to do, anything to hide how my pulse had quickened at the warmth of his leg against mine. Clean, warm, impossibly close. I told myself it was just the night air playing tricks, just two people talking. But my body knew better. It leaned in without permission, just as Alex leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek, carrying the soft heat of red wine and something sweeter underneath. The sound of my son's car pulling into the driveway shattered everything. Headlights swept across the porch like a sudden spotlight. We jumped apart, hearts pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it from the street. I hurried inside, cheeks burning, the cool air suddenly too sharp against my flushed skin, telling myself it was a lucky escape, but nothing had happened, that I could still pretend this was all innocent. Yet later, alone in the dark of my room with the house finally quiet, the memory of how close his lips had been left me aching in a way I couldn't name. The unresolved tension coiled tighter, feeding this quiet obsession that refused to let me sleep. My hand rested on my stomach, feeling the rise and fall of breaths that still came too fast. Why did they almost feel heavier than anything real? I lay there listening to the faint creak of the guest room floor, wondering if he was replaying it too. The pull between us had only grown stronger in that near miss, and part of me already dreaded and craved what tomorrow might bring when we were alone again. A few days later, my son texted from work asking if Alex could swing by to help with the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. He was stuck in meetings all afternoon. I said yes before I could think twice, my fingers hovering over the screen like they belonged to someone else. The space was impossibly small once Alex stepped in behind me. His chest nearly brushed my back as I knelt by the sink, the cool wrench heavy in my palm. He trolled off him in slow waves, sinking through my thin blouse. Every time I reached for a tool, our arms grazed, deliberate, lingering a heartbeat longer than needed. His aftershave, something crisp and woody, filled the air like invisible smoke, making my thoughts blur at the edges. "Here, let me guide you," he murmured, voice low and close to my ear. His fingers settled over mine on the wrench, warm and steady, pressing just enough to show the turn. I forgot how to breathe for a second. The metal stayed cold, but his skin burned against the back of my hand. I told myself it was only practical, nothing more, yet my pulse answered differently, quick and traitorous in my throat. I shifted my weight, and my shoulder pressed into his chest for balance. He didn't move away. Neither did I. The faucet dripped steadily between us, a tiny rhythm that matched the unsteady beat inside my ribs. His breath stirred the hair at my neck, warm and even, while mine came shallow and quick. Why did something so ordinary feel like falling? That night the house was quiet, my husband already asleep, beside me with his familiar, even snores. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, sheets soft against my legs, cool where they touched my flushed skin. Alex's youthful focus kept replaying. The way his eyes had stayed on my face instead of drifting, attentive in a way that made me feel seen again. Not just the mom who kept everything running. My mind wandered to my husband's routine touch, comfortable but distant like a well-worn path. Then back to Alex's careful hands, the quiet strength in them. Guilt crashed over me suddenly, heavy and cold. How could I let these thoughts take root? He was my son's friend, practically family. I pressed my face into the pillow, breathing in the faint trace of laundry detergent, trying to drown the ache blooming low and insistent. Yet the jealousy slipped in next, sharpened uninvited. I pictured him laughing with girls his own age, their easy energy matching his, hands that were trembling with hesitation. The image twisted something inside me, turning the guilt into a hotter, hungrier thing I couldn't push down. Fingers curled into the sheets, imagining instead the cotton of his t-shirt from our brief goodbye hug earlier. How it had felt warm and lived in against my cheek. I shouldn't want more. I did anyway. The next afternoon a sudden thunderstorm rolled in, skies darkening like an unspoken warning. Power flickered once, then died completely, leaving the house in heavy silence broken only by rain lashing the windows. Alex and I ended up in the living room, gathering candles from the drawer. Their flames danced across his face as he set them on the coffee table, casting shifting gold over the sharp line of his jaw. I reached for the spare blanket folded on the couch, fingers brushing his as he moved at the same moment. Neither of us pulled back. His hand closed gently around mine, warm and sure, sending a slow current up my arm. He drew me closer without a word, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the rapid thud of his heart through his chest, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. Rain hammered harder outside, almost merging. His breath mingled with mine, carrying the clean scent of rain-soaked hair and something warmer, distinctly him. Our lips hovered a breath apart, the almost touch suspended in the charged dark. Every reason to stop screamed in my head: my family, my age, the line we were never meant to near. Yet my body leaned in, gravity pulling me towards surrender I craved more than air. This was the edge. One tiny movement and everything would change. I wanted him completely, the realization hitting like thunder rolling through me. I pulled back at the last instant, my palms flat against his chest, the heat of him burning through the thin cotton. Son, the words came out broken, barely louder than the rain still tapping against the windows. Every nerve in my body screamed the opposite, a wild current pulling me forward, even as shame flooded my veins like ice water. Years of marriage, the quiet, steady rhythm of being someone's wife, someone's mother. How could I risk it all for this? For him? A man half my age who looked at me like I was the only woman still breathing in the room. My heart hammered so hard I was sure he could feel it under my ribs. The moral battle tore through me, raw and relentless, leaving me trembling on the edge of something I had no right to want. I turned away before I could change my mind. The space between us suddenly cold and accusing. My legs felt unsteady as I walked to the kitchen, gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. This was wrong. So wrong, yet the ache lingered, deep and insistent, whispering that I had been asleep for years and he had woken something dangerous inside me. I pressed my forehead to the cool tile, breathing slow and shaky, trying to remember who I was supposed to be. The next morning the kitchen smelled of coffee and toast, ordinary and safe. My son sat at the table scrolling his phone, hair still messy from sleep. Alex moved quietly around the counter, pouring juice like nothing had happened. I kept my eyes on my mug, the steam curling up between us like a fragile shield. Then my son laughed softly. "Dude, I saw that text notification on your phone last night. Something about thinking about her again?" He nudged Alex's shoulder, teasing. My stomach dropped so fast the room tilted. Her. Was he talking about me? The secret we'd been cradling in the dark now felt paper-thin, ready to tear at any careless word. I avoided Alex's eyes across the table, but I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and knowing. The butter knife trembled in my hand. Breakfast had never felt so dangerous. Later that day the house held its breath. The hallway felt narrower than usual when Alex appeared at the other end. He didn't speak at first, just walked toward me until the air grew thick and warm. "I can't stop thinking about last night," he confessed, voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. His hand brushed my waist, barely there, yet it sent sparks racing across my skin. The pull surged again, magnetic and merciless. I felt myself leaning in despite everything. The front door clicked open. My son's voice rang out clear and cheerful. "Mom, I'm home." We froze in place, bodies inches apart, hearts hammering in frantic unison. The air thickened with unspoken desire and the terrifying thrill that our secret was one careless sound away from shattering everything. His fingers lingered a second longer on my waist before slipping away, leaving a ghost of warmth that haunted me. I stepped back, smoothing my shirt with trembling hands, the ordinary hallway suddenly alive with what we almost did. That evening I moved through the house like a ghost, setting the table while laughter floated from the living room. My son and Alex played video games, their easy banter a painful reminder of the line we had crossed and couldn't uncross. I caught Alex's eye once when no one was looking. The look he gave me was quiet hunger wrapped in regret, the same storm I carried inside. Dinner passed in fragments of conversation I barely heard. Every time our hands neared the salt shaker or the bread basket, electricity crackled, unspoken and alive. I smiled at my husband across the table, the man I had built a life with, and felt the ache of betrayal twist deeper. Alone in the laundry room folding towels that still carried the faint scent of fabric softener, I let the tears come. Not loud, just silent tracks down my cheeks. This fire between us had already begun to consume me, slow and sweet and devastating. I knew we should stop. Yet the thought of never feeling that pull again left an emptiness wider than the years stretching ahead. My son's footsteps passed in the hall, innocent and unaware. The house settled into its familiar quiet, but inside me nothing was settled. Only the lingering warmth on my waist, the memory of his breath so close, then the haunting certainty that neither of us wanted it to stop. Some secrets don't tend. They simply learn to breathe in the dark, waiting for the next moment the lights go out.